Welcome to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast, where we talk to IT marketing leaders about how to drive more sales. Hosted by Carlos Corredor, founder of Condor, an Inc. 5000 company and one of the fastest growing IT marketing agencies in the US.
3, 2, 1, 0.
This episode is brought to you by Condor, a digital marketing agency for mid-market IT companies. Most marketing teams struggle to drive sales, overwhelmed by long sales cycles and an elusive audience. Condor helps you measure and generate a qualified pipeline, make the most with your budget, and finally get executive recognition. You can learn more at condoragency.com. And today we have with us Alex Love. Alex has over 15 years of marketing and communications experience across both the private and public sector. She is currently the VP of Marketing Communications at Riva Solutions, an IT government contractor and also part of the Inc. 5000 list. She's also a power lifter, a new mom, congratulations, and a podcast host as well. So welcome, Alex.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the business to government's B2G space for probably the last 6 or 7 years. Before that, I was a consultant, so I've done the billable contract work. So I understand the world that we're marketing and how to, work with the government, build these systems. And I've sort of bounced around before that, worked in the private sector, worked in the public sector, had my own company for a while. So I've had a flavor across all industries. But really enjoy the time being able to build lean teams and build a brand story and be able to really take a company into a market space. So enjoying doing that in the government sector right now.
Yeah, that's an area I think most people haven't worked in the government sector, right? And a lot of times the strategies that you hear in the marketing world, whether that's direct to consumer, but in particular B2B and IT and in the IT services and consulting world, not necessarily apply when you only work with the government, right? There's different ways to grow your company when you have that segment. Is that a fair assessment, or could you explain us the differences and especially in the marketing priorities and how do you do the goals for the year, what channels you use? If you could walk us through that, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of differences and a lot of things that work, or a lot of data that you have on the private sector side just doesn't apply in government contracting, which makes my job somewhat easier in some respects because I'm not a lead gen shop generally. So I get a break on some of those standard marketing metrics that others, get kept up at night from. But then we are shooting in the dark a little bit more because attribution is very, very hard. And getting to our customers, our exact customers sometimes can be a challenge too. So I guess the first largest difference is probably the sales cycle length, which dictates how marketing sort of the funnel works on the government sector side. So any of the deals that we're talking about, the sales cycle could be anywhere from 18 to 36 months. So we're talking years worth of preparation, a ton of time and a ton of opportunities to learn about the deal, go meet the customers, figure out what they're doing, and it's a phased procurement cycle. So, it's not as easy as like putting an ad up and someone clicks it and they buy your product, right? We're talking, again, multiple stakeholders, years, evaluations boards, multiple criterias, proposals, many rounds. We've had video proposals. It's a very, very heavy acquisition cycle because the government has to do their due diligence to bring in the right contractor and be the best stewards of taxpayer dollars. So that's the biggest probably change. And sort of when you come from the private sector, you're like, well, just, build this funnel and attribute across, and we can't track that data. So I typically can't tell you how successful a white paper is. I'm actually most of the time relying on our salespeople or the in-person relationships that we're able to build at trade shows, at association events, just sort of out in the networking world. B2G is a very relationship-driven environment. And so because we have 2 to 3 years to build these relationships with clients. There's a lot of partners that we work with, so the ecosystem is quite large. So we do a lot of thought leadership development. We take a lot of the insights coming from, the government out there talking about their problems. We'll turn that into some thought leadership, white paper solutions, other things. And then our job is really to help position our salespeople and our business development, our solutions team to be in the right places, to meet and shake hands with the right people, and then work with our client delivery team who's actually doing the work to make sure we're talking about the great work that we're doing, helping them land and expand in the accounts that we have. So a lot more behind the scenes, a lot more insights generation and conversion of content, and moving sort of the needle very slowly than you're able to typically do sort of on the public sector, on the private sector side, where you can put a lot of cash behind an ad, you can, raise your impressions, you can get your clicks to be higher. Like I said, we don't have a lot of that data. So we're dealing with a little bit more of a quantitative side, people saying, hey, this worked really well. Here's some insights. Let's turn this into a white paper and get this into the hands of the right person.
And with, I assume another big difference is, even compared to a B2B company that has a very targeted niche, right? We're still talking probably about thousands of companies, or at least hundreds of companies, right? Whereas in the B2G sector, maybe that's not the case. Or in your case, how many potential customers do you have total, right? And how, I mean, can you apply the term account-based marketing strategy to what you guys do, and how is it different?
Yeah, no, you absolutely can. And the government being so large, right? Same principles apply. Your customer isn't everyone, and that's super true in the government space too. We specialize in certain agencies that we have relationships at, or that we know that our solution set will work there. So someone, coming into the government space won't be successful if they're trying to do a defense contractor, right? They've got Army, Navy over here. That world is completely different from the intel space, which is completely different network, from the federal civilian side, from the healthcare side. Every single agency operates differently, and there are similarities between similar agencies, but you really have to be able to narrow your focus and say, this is my agency, these are my customers, and sort of work down from there and get as granular as saying, hey, we're going to work with this, OCIO office, or we're going to build relationships with these contract teams, these scrum masters, these teams, what have you, down to that level. So yeah, endless customers in the federal space, but if you try to chase everybody, you'll be not successful at all.
And you mentioned 18 to 24 months of a sales cycle, which is longer than B2B. It's already longer than obviously direct to consumer. It's also longer than the average retention for some marketing positions these days, right? So how big of a challenge is that, right? Maybe you're starting to talk to a potential customer, but you have 2 or 3 people, the different people, that come in and out of your company. And by the time, how big of a challenge is that, right? Is internal retention of your team versus or compared to that long sales cycle. And also and I assume also the benefit is, okay, it takes me a long time to, let's say, close that deal, but then retention should be higher, right? Would that be a pro as well? Couple questions in there, but I think they're related.
Yeah. So as I stated, government relationship building, we're talking about the people side of services. So you really truly are marketing the people. And that is a huge concern, is the turnover of the teams, because we're relying so heavily on people who have relationships with other contractors, who know, some of the federal employees or people who are currently doing this work or sort of adjacent to the work, not only for information, but also to connect and open doors. So yeah, when there is turnover in some of those relationship holders, that can be a big deterrent, because you automatically, that door sort of closes if your company isn't able to successfully position themselves and already being, doing work or being able to prove their worth on the ground. So earlier in the sales cycle, especially when you're talking about a new customer that you don't have as good of intimacy with, that can be a huge deterrent, and deals will go south, where companies will decide, if this person, we don't have this relationship anymore, maybe this is something that we're no longer going to pursue, because this is no longer something that we have the insights to be able to do. So it is a huge concern concern. It's not as much of a concern on my team for marketing because, again, we work a lot more behind the scenes than you probably would in some of these other sectors. So I don't run sales. I run sales and internal communications. So we do have a specific business development team that we work very, very closely with, who are a lot more client facing. So turnover on that team definitely has a big impact, as well as project managers, other people who are on the ground working. You'll see in the government contracting space, it's very common for a project manager or someone who's doing the technical work to be serving on that project for decades, but having worked for every iteration of the contractor who happens to hold the contract. So that person has solidified their spot as the person, and sometimes the contractor who wins is the person who's able to like pull that staff and sway them to sort of join their company, join their bid. So yeah, it's a huge relationship game. It's a lot of chess. And yeah, when people come and go, it does create a huge impact.
You mentioned, and of course, for everything that you're explaining, lead generation is not the goal, the priority of your team in this case. I assume it's then more, okay, how effectively are you supporting marketing operations? How effectively you're supporting sales with, let's say, sales materials, the website, the messaging. But I want you to explain us how, first of all, how do you define what's the mission or the function of your team? And then how are you measured? Since again, 99% of the marketing teams out there are measured by how much leads and clients they can close, but not this case.
Yeah, so we still have metrics and common metrics that you would see, on the private sector side. And we work sort of on a couple of thresholds, right? We have the enterprise brand and sort of the Riva solutions positioning in the market, which we very much target at, big, broad brush general audiences. So not all of the people that we're speaking to directly are clients. We also do a ton of recruitment marketing to bring in the best talent. That's a little bit closer, I think, to a private sector, lead gen shop, right? We can kind of track, are people applying? Do they interacting with those posts? And are we getting the best talent in the door? We're also doing a lot of B2B marketing. So almost all government contracts have multiple companies working. And so whether we're a prime contractor or a subcontractor, there's a lot of people in our network that we work together with. So we are always looking for additional partners to work with who might have a niche skill set or a better client relationship. So we're sort of talking to them directly too, to say like, hey, come join our community. And again, you can see a little bit more of that attribution to say, someone came to an event and now sort of we're talking a deal with them. So it's a little bit closer. But yeah, when we're talking down at sort of that granular level that's related to any sort of deals that we're trying to win or any clients that we're trying to expand, that's when, it gets a little bit harder to attribute. So we do a ton of tracking on where our core customers are speaking. The really great thing about government marketing is our customers are out there like specifically telling you what their problems are and how they want to solve them, right? You don't always get those insights as directly in other agencies. So we're able to go out, listen to them speak, take some of those, insights and churn that into thought leadership, and then be able to position that back as a white paper or solution to get that in front of them for a meeting. And at that point, we sort of have to rely on our business development or our solutions team to say, hey, this met the mark. They're interested. We're going to take another meeting. Let's talk about a follow-on piece, something else that's a little bit more cutting edge or, on the sort of bleeding edge of this technology to put that up forward. So yeah, it kind of depends on what side and what audience we're talking about. And then of course, sort of what level marketing we're working on. But we still care about, website visits, impressions, engagement. We still track all of that. And, the big thing that my team focuses on, LinkedIn is really our primary target audience, and that hits all of our different audiences that we're trying to speak to. So we pay a lot of attention to our growth and engagement metrics on there because we want to keep our community talking. We want to keep our community growing so that we're always sort of top of mind in people's feeds when they have information or they have deals or, they're interested in an opportunity with us.
And yeah, so definitely back to the true concept of integrated marketing, right? Where you're bringing in-house some of these functions of customer insights that I think a lot of times are kind of forgotten when you put so much focus and effort in the lead generation side of things. You mentioned LinkedIn. That's obviously a very powerful platform for B2B and IT services. What has worked for you guys there? What's your advice when using that platform, both for organic? I don't know if you do any paid there, but even if it's from organic standpoint, and to engage with your target audience there and build a community there, what has worked and what's your general advice?
Yeah, so we don't spend any money in terms of advertising. So all of our community growth and interaction is organic, which is definitely the harder way to go about it. But at the end of the day, we have a stronger community because we have people who actually truly want to be there on our interacting with our content, which you can see, when you're taking a look at your competitor data, that we have much, much higher, engagement rates than some of our competitors who have maybe similar size audiences. But what works for us, I think, is being authentic. And I think that's like the catch-22 with social media, right? If that's a part of your platform, is a lot of things are so polished, and it is even in your personal life, right? People post the best picture or the coolest thing that they're doing on Instagram, TikTok, what have you. And that is such a curated version of their life that that's not their daily, right? So we take a similar approach to sort of, again, the authenticity that our brand has, because at the end of the day, someone may recognize our brand and sort of our brand story, but they probably have more stronger connections to individuals and relationships with the people that they've interacted with. And so we're very, very heavy on the culture content and sort of the people focus, because as a services agency, maybe our solutions aren't that much different from our competitors, but the people truly are. And that's sort of what you're buying at the end of the day. If you choose to work with Riva, is the people that are going to do the work. So you want to know that we share the same values, that you're going to enjoy working with us, that we, stand for what we say we're going to do. And so that's a really, really heavy focus for us. And that content always performs a ton better than our solutions content, which is a little silly being an IT company. And it's something that we're playing with the mix. We were up until last year in a protected business class called 8A, and that is something that the government sets aside work for certain size businesses. After we graduated out of that into this mid-market size, we're now competing against these massive companies who have, millions of dollars of budgets and all of these other things that we just don't have, right? So we have to have that sort of differentiator and that authenticity, that you're getting the person, the person who wrote that blog is probably the person who's actually going to show up and do the work, versus sort of being, this very highly polished thing that, GDIT or Lockheed Martin or someone paid a service to put together. So that's been really, really successful for us. And we also, to be a little bit different, we have a company mascot, which is very memorable. So typically not something you see in the government contracting space. You see a lot of like red, white, and blue, very patriotic, sort of risk-averse marketing. But we sort of go the opposite way. We want to be fun. We want to be memorable. That's, a part of our culture. And so we put that very forth in our marketing as well. So you can see we have a little alpaca. So this is Alpac. He travels around with us, and he's been to some really cool places. So we send those out to employees. They take them around. That's another big core tenet of our marketing is employee generated content. We do company-wide trainings on LinkedIn and how to leverage those networks, because even if you're not in a sales or marketing or forward-facing role, everyone has responsibilities for company growth and can open a door. And so we want to make sure that everyone who wants to be engaging can and has the tools to do so. So we do in company-wide trainings. We have people posting, hashtags, alpacas, all the places. And it's been really fun to see that grow, because again, it's that human element that's connecting people, and people are seeing, oh, wow, like their employees really like working there. Their content is like very authentic. It's very true to the brand. And the post always goes so much further when a person at the company posts it versus the company account.
Yeah, and that's, I can't remember the last time I either interacted or even clicked on a content piece that's from a company. And I would say I'm a heavy user of LinkedIn. I'm every day, almost every day at least, there consuming content, but it's always from people, right? When I see a face to it, and maybe the first post or the first comment, you think it's interesting to start following the person. or they start following you, whatever it might be. But yeah, as you mentioned, when it comes from a company, you don't know if it was a CEO, the one that wrote it, probably not, or the intern, or even an outsourced company that's doing content for them. So it's much harder to create trust, which is obviously what you want to do when you're putting content out there. Doing it with your own team has its own set of challenges. I think you guys are one of the most mature companies in that aspect that I've talked to, because just by having internal trainings to encourage people to do that in a way that it's on brand, I think it's more than most companies out there. What any advice in terms of for the companies that want to start doing that, and how to do that in a practical way?
Yeah. Find a couple of champions. And I think it's easier to start with people who are comfortable with social media in a personal aspect, right? So if someone already has a LinkedIn, or they already have TikTok, Twitter, insert whatever channel, and they're comfortable posting, it's much easier to sort of upscale them on, hey, here's sort of what we're looking for from a company perspective and the types of content that we'd like you to share or repost. And teach them, hashtags are kind of going out the window in terms of LinkedIn, right? We don't really need that search feature anymore. But if you have branded ones that you want people to use, giving them those. We gamified it at the beginning. So we brought on, core brand ambassadors from different programs to introduce them, give them more visibility. We sent them like a huge swag box of like a whole bunch of Riva stuff so that they, could take branded pictures, did some contests with them, do all of the things, check the box, write this blog, do this, first person complete it, gets a gift card, what have you, whatever is sort of appealing to that audience. But as soon as you get a couple people sort of trained and through your program that are sort of low hanging fruit, easier targets, it's much easier to sort of build that program up and continue to go up a level. Because if you start to see your coworkers getting rewarded, getting more visibility, getting opportunities that you're not getting, and they're doing something as easy as writing a blog post every quarter, or taking a couple pictures and sending it to marketing, that becomes less of a barrier to entry, because marketing is always one of those things that people are like, yeah, whatever, right? They're like, it's not my responsibility, someone else is going to do it. And it's like one of the hardest positions to be in, because you're so reliant on stakeholders to contribute to your content. You can't make this stuff up in a lot of spaces. So yeah, start out with a couple people, put a formal program around it, build up that training material. And then we've started to see that brand ambassador take it back to their project team, and then we'll do sort of project specific trainings. And then it's sort of ballooned up into, once a quarter, we'll do sort of an all hands training for anyone who's interested, because you always have new people coming into the company. So you always don't know who sort of the next brand ambassador is, or who has a great story to help you tell.
And how big of a challenge is, or what's a bigger challenge, to get people to start posting and being present on LinkedIn, or to monitor what they're saying and making sure that it's not, too off brand, let's say? Because obviously things are not going to come out as if the marketing team wrote everything themselves. But I assume there's also some supervision and some guidance, and even some, let's say, policies that you have to put in place too, or not. I don't know but what's a bigger challenge?
Yeah, I think it depends on your company culture and sort of the industry that you're in. I think the bigger challenge is getting people to post, to be honest, because again, it's just not something that comes inherently to a lot of people. And even if it is something that they do personally, they're not always, especially if you're not in a marketing or a sales or BD role, it's not the first thing that they think about. So I think getting the ball rolling and getting people to post is a lot harder than keeping track of the content that they're posting. Because if they're posting correctly, they're tagging your company. And so it's pretty easy to check the feeds and see, like, employee, activity here and the other thing. We've definitely had examples of some content go out that was, from an employee's perspective, that we like maybe wouldn't have been exactly the graphic or the way that we would have done it. And if it's close enough, again, it's from their personal accounts. So if it's good enough, we'll sort of let it roll. If it's like a repeating thing, like we had at one point a recruiter who was starting to create her own graphics, and I'm like, I love the enthusiasm. This is not our brand. And we do create a lot of recruiting graphics that they easily could have pulled from. So I'm sort of like, let's have a conversation, let's whirl it back. Is there anything that we can provide to you in terms of templates or other kinds of content that would make it easier for you to do your own personal posts? Because I don't want to take away from that. You have a huge, audience and network, and I want this to feel personal to you and authentic to you. But we can't like have purple on this. Like we got to make it look a little bit, like more streamlined, especially in a role that is as out in the market as sort of a recruiter. So yeah, I think you have to kind of figure out what your threshold is for that. And the more people that you have posting and the more good examples you have and the more you can point to, like, this person did a really great post, people will sort of see what the threshold is. But that's where that training comes in, is that we give them like the guide rails of, here's how we would sort of think about putting this post together. Here's what we're typically looking for. And as long as it's like in the 70%, okay mark, we're good to go.
Yeah, I see a lot of brand managers that have that threshold, let's say up to 95%, and at that point, it's going to be impossible to get the ball rolling. So,
and if that is the level that you're looking at, then you have to identify those people within your company that like have to have that perfect branding, right? And for us, that's really sort of the CEO, but he is very much involved. He does a lot of his own things. Does he write his own LinkedIn articles? No, right? We do those for him. So I think you just have to find that right threshold of, is it a C-suite or an executive or a senior leader who should have really perfect content and should be supported by a team that can provide that content for them? If the answer is yes, then it should be more on that, closer to the 100% threshold. But if it's just sort of, an average employee or a line manager or someone who's just interested in helping to spread the word, then I think you can be a little bit more flexible with it.
That makes a lot of sense. Alex, one thing that I wanted to ask, and this is not tied to the government sector, but more of, marketing it's around building teams, right? You have experience building teams, passion for it from what I've seen on your profile, and you mentioned that a couple of times in the podcast. What is your philosophy around building a successful marketing team, and your, let's say, unique point of view around that, and what has worked for you and what hasn't?
Yeah, I think in a lot of instances, and I've built a couple teams from the ground up. So I've been a solo marketer, and my position at Riva, I came on to build the marketing team. So over the past 4 years, I've been able to iterate the team and sort of have, flex the team as, the company needs different sort of skill sets. But I think the number one thing that I'm typically looking for is personality and a culture fit. So almost every team that I've built has been a pretty lean, small team. And as I said, we operate more on the organic side. So we're not supported by a lot of agencies or a lot of extra cash. So I really truly are looking for people who are like go-getters, who I can trust to kind of own their lane, come together for some ideas, but really be able to sort of execute. And that doesn't always look like a specialist, right? I'm very lucky if I get someone who has like a core skill set. And it's hard because marketing has so many specialty skill sets built within it. The average person who doesn't work in marketing thinks we can all do it all, and that's truly not the case, right? Yes, maybe I can make your PowerPoint look a little bit better, but like, don't ask me about InDesign, right? I can get by, but not well. And so I rarely have the opportunity to sort of fill a specialist role. I'm generally looking people who have a really good, can-do attitude, mesh very well with the team, because again, we have a very large scope. We have a lot of things to get done, and so it matters a little bit more to me that I have someone that we like get along. The team gets along, we trust each other, we can sort of bounce ideas off each other and be honest about the feedback and the ideas, versus someone who comes in with like this huge resume of all of these like amazing things that they've done, but maybe, isn't great to work with. And so I think that's usually my approach, especially at the more junior level. I think most things can be taught, but you really can't teach people to have like a collaborative, good attitude. You have it or you don't. And so yeah, that's kind of my philosophy for building small teams.
How do you filter for that? How do you recognize that during the interview process, right?
Yeah, and I definitely have some horror stories of some people who interviewed well and we thought would be good fits and then get in the door and
Mhm.
didn't work out. So, there are definitely people out there who can have a great conversation or do a great interview, have, like look very polished and then, get in the door and don't dazzle, I guess. So part of it is you just kind of, the longer you sit in this role, I think the more clear it is to you pretty quickly who someone will be that will be successful or not successful. And I think the other thing is like tracking on similar experiences that they have. So I'm always very upfront and honest about sort of the expectations of the role, especially at a small growing company. The pace is very, very quick, and you have to be able to work across all different departments and all different levels, right? My junior associate is working daily with the CEO, and you have to be okay to manage up at that level. And even someone working directly from me, my schedule is very packed. I forget things. So you have to be comfortable with saying, Alex, you owe me this. You forgot, right? You can't let me like off the hook. I owe you things. I should get those done for you. So I think there's just some guiding questions that you can put in the interview, and it is a little bit harder in virtual interviews to read people's body language. So depending on the position, we will ask people to come in and sit for an in-person interview if possible, depending on where the location is, especially when we have a role that is more events-based or more sort of people-oriented, just to make sure they track on paper, virtually, and in person. But sometimes we invite people to happy hour or like like a low key event just to see like, hey, you're in consideration. Does this culture fit work for you? Are you able to sort of meet new people and float the room? Or are you sort of sitting in the corner and, not interested in sort of meeting people? And I know that's like horrifying because I'm actually an extrovert and I'm not an extrovert. So like to me, if that was my final interview, I don't know that I would pass that test. But sometimes, it just kind of depends on the role and what the expectations are in terms of how you're able to sniff that out. But again, my track record is very far from 100%.
Alexa, how about in terms of complementing, from the way that you're describing, that sounds like internal team, right? Like permanent employees of your company. Do you have any either success or failure around complementing internal team with contractors, freelancers, consultants, agencies?
Yeah, absolutely. Both sides of the house. I think it sort of depends on what you're looking to fill. There are certain things that the skill set evolves too quickly that just makes sense to outsource because me and my small team are never going to keep up with like SEO best practices, right? Some of that stuff just moves too fast. And so to be able to outsource that to someone whose entire job is to know that, piece of the market makes sense. And, it's typically more cost effective than us trying to piece that together. Some of the places where we've not had so much success, we were ghostwriting some of our content for a little bit. And I was trying to get some of our senior leaders to publish more often. And so we brought on a ghostwriter to sit with some of these leaders and sort of learn their style and help churn out some of their insights a little bit faster. That was kind of hit or miss. And I think that's a personality and a writing style thing. Certain ghostwriters can pick up people very, very quickly, and that just sort of jives with their general approach. And then some people like are so uncomfortable with a ghostwriter and how they're writing things, you end up with sort of a mishmash of content afterwards. And the other tricky thing with ghostwriting too is especially unless you're able to form a relationship with someone and they're writing your content for a very long time, it can be difficult to have them learn your voice and tone and sort of your brand points and messaging. Some of that content ends up being a little bit more generic. And if that's good for you and you want to work from that, sometimes that saves you the time of writing a first draft or sort of doing the brainstorming and sort of, the story pull. But you can do a lot of that with things like ChatGPT at this point, right? Use it as sort of a brainstorming tool to get you an outline or get you a first draft and then be able to comb back through, pull out all the very obvious AI pieces and then kind of put your own brand spin on it too. So there are a lot of other tools that you can use at this point to sort of get to that first draft level without having to use a person. But yeah, if you're looking for a specialized skill, or we have a set of free of wonderful freelancers that we use for like videography and professional photography and other vendors like that, that we don't always have the space for an in-house person. But we built great relationships and they sort of have learned our brand and look what we're looking for at this point. So yeah, you can be successful on both sides. It just sort of depends on your budget, how much creativity you sort of need to have, and ownership. And then I think like how specialized of a skill you're looking to outsource.
One thing that has helped us and has saved us a lot of time when writing content is having a GPT, a Condor GPT. We call it our Condor copywriting manifesto, where it's just 10 simple rules, and we pass content through that GPT, whether that's for a landing page, for a blog post, for whatever marketing material we put out there, and that has saved us a lot of time in efficiencies, approvals, writing, rewriting. So I can see what you're saying, right? With AI, how to leverage it. That's another area. How are you leveraging AI? It's a question that these days I always like to ask.
Yeah. First drafts of a lot of things. So it saves so much time from me staring at the computer trying to write a press release. It's like the least fun thing to write, but ChatGPT does a great job of pulling in all the salient points. And then you can easily go back through and just pull out, the obvious things and sort of add in your brand messaging. It's really great, I think, at like outlines and templates too. So if we have a niche technology or something that we're looking to write a white paper on that I don't personally know a lot about the technology, but the solutions team needs sort of a guide to be able to fill in the content. It's really great to be able to put that in there. And obviously it can search the internet. So it knows a lot more about site reliability engineering than I do, right? Which is essentially zero. So it puts together really, really wonderful sort of outlines for, thoughts and things like that. Other ways I use it, I mean, if there's like a quick project plan or sort of something very simple that I just need, again, a working outline, I think that's a really great way to leverage those too, because you can easily copy, paste, delete, take away. And I learned the other day that not everyone realized that you're supposed to have a conversation with ChatGPT, that they just thought like the first output was what you get. So that was kind of funny, that people, are still sort of learning how these things work, but they do get smart pretty quick, and you can be pretty direct with them in terms of like, I don't like this paragraph, I don't like this, sort of change the audience, change the format. And sometimes it's not worth it, right? You can just make the updates quicker yourself, but sometimes it's good to have a fresh perspective, especially because staring at a blank page sometimes, is very, very difficult.
Yeah, I always have to tell ChatGPT, be concise, be bold. Every time I ask, it's be concise, be bold.
I know, I'll be like, write a summary, and it'll give you like 6 paragraphs. You're like, that's not a summary. Like, get it down here. And I always I think it's great when people use it, especially since we're dealing with stakeholders who are very, very technical. And their writing style, they're not writers, they're coders, they're developers, what have you. But it's always funny. There's a couple of keywords that you can tell, like if anything has the word delve in it, I know that you did not write this, that ChatGPT wrote this. So just knowing what those like keywords are that are like a little bit weird or strange in the sentence that ChatGPT defaults to, so they could just delete all of those and replace it with more simple, easier to understand context.
Alex, anything else that I haven't asked that we haven't gotten to talk to that you think the audience would benefit from hearing from you?
That's a loaded question. No, I mean, we've kind of covered it all. I mean, government contracting is just one of those things that you don't learn overnight. It's taken me a long time to sort of get where I am, and there's still a ton of stuff that I don't know. But, the good thing about being in government contracting is, you get a lot more insights. You directly know who your customers are a lot of times. You just need to be a little bit more creative with sort of how you track and outreach. So not an easy market to start in, but definitely a good industry if you can get your foot in the door.
Any book or mentor that has been particularly helpful to you that you would either acknowledge or recommend?
Book or mentor. Let's see. So I will say in terms of like new fresh content, so obviously podcasts, the content is a lot fresher on podcasts than it is from a book. I do love a good book, but I do think to stay up to date, podcasts just come out faster. So I do really, really love Adam Grant's podcast. I think he's got some really great people on there and some really good ideas. So it's just good to kind of hear the content that's coming out from him. And Cal Newport is also a favorite one. He has a lot of great ideas about productivity and like really unrealistic things, because he's very big on sort of less distractions, less multitasking, sort of more deep focus work. And I love reading those books because I wish I could do that and all of the amazing things I could do if I had, 16 hours to just focus. Not realistic, but always a good pipe dream for sure.
Yeah. Got it. I heard about Adam Grant, but what was the second one? Colin Newport, you mentioned?
Cal Newport, yeah.
Yeah. Look him up because I need some of those tips as well. Anyway, thanks, Alex. Appreciate your time. It's been great having you on the podcast.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe for future episodes. Until next time.